Hey everyone, welcome to lesson 5 of the Getting Started with Motion Graphics course here for Tuts Plus. My name is Vincent Nguyen, and today we're going to be talking about shape layers, mask, as well as vectors within After Effects to help you with motion graphics. So without further ado, let's hop into After Effects here and talk about some mask. So in After Effects here, I have a blank composition open. Let's go ahead and create a new solid layer. So hit Control or Command Y. And we're going to call this bar. And then we're going to make it a nice orange color. So mask pretty much takes the current layer and mask or crops it out. For an example, I have a full nice solid bar layer right here. And if you want to apply mask to it, you can see that if we draw a nice mask, make sure that your mask tool is selected here. Make sure that your solid layer is selected. And when we create a mask, you can see that a mask is not really its own layer. It's actually the same layer that it's applied to, except it creates a nice subcategory, a mask right here. So a mask is not really its own layer. It's kind of dependent on another layer. And we can use mask to crop out maybe images or videos, whatever you want. It's mainly used for compositing. We kind of use shape layers in motion graphics, but it's not really powerful in my opinion, in motion graphics anyways. I personally wouldn't use mask for motion graphics unless I really need to make something real quick, or I want full control over the path of the mask. For example, I can customize pretty much any point on here really quickly and very easily. But other than that, I wouldn't really use mask. It's great for really quick stuff and very basic stuff like these kind of rectangles here. So for an example, let me just show you where masking would be kind of handy. For an example, if you wanted to create a very quick pie chart or maybe a bar graph, you can quickly create a bar this way and apply a linear wipe. I believe we covered this transition back in episode 2. If we apply it to a bar, we can actually set the wipe angle to 180 degrees. And as you can see, when we play around with the transition completion, you can see that we can pretty much animate this bar to create a nice kind of bar chart or bar graph. So pretty cool. If you want to create a nice pie chart, we can delete the linear wipe and we can delete the mask. And then we go up to here and select the ellipse tool and hold down shift and just draw a nice circle. Just drag this up here. And then we can apply a radial wipe. Again, another transition we covered in episode 2. Drag that in. Make sure that your wipe center is at the center of your circle. Around there. And again, like the linear wipe, we can animate this thing by animating the transition completion. Pretty cool. As you can see, it's not very 100% accurate. For an example, if I have 75% right here, we're only showing 25%, and this can be easily be fixed if you have some basic expression knowledge as well as some basic algebra, but we'll be covering that later in another course. So, but for now, that should work, and that kind of just gives you a few examples of where you would use a mask for some quick stuff like that. Pretty cool. Let's go and talk about vectors real quick. Nothing really too important. First off, this is a vector right here. It was created as a vector in After Effects. You can create vectors in Photoshop or Illustrator and bring it in. But pretty much vectors are very, very powerful because they're being generated within the application. So for an example, if I just scale this thing up, you can see that we have nice, crisp, and sharp edges. Now, if you were to scale up an image, it would be very, very pixelated because you're pretty much stretching out pixels. But vectors are graphics created in the application which generate the shape. So we're not really stretching any pixels, we're just kind of adding more, if that made sense. So let's say you brought a vector into After Effects. I have a composition set up here, and I have a vector pre-made already in Illustrator. This is just a simple vector.ai that I created in Illustrator. Nothing too fancy, it's just some basic stars. And as you can see, the image is pretty small, it's 640 by 360, and this composition is 720p. So when I scale this thing up, you can see that it doesn't really behave like a vector. This is a vector layer created in Illustrator, but it's not really behaving as a vector in After Effects. So how do we fix this? Now if you toggle the switches/modes, you'll see a little sun icon right here, and this is for collapse transformation for vector layers, and it's going to continually rasterize your vector layers. So if I just check this little sun icon for the layer, you can see that we have some nice crisp and sharp edges again. just as if it was generated in After Effects. So just a really quick vector tip for those people, because I know that in motion graphics a lot of people like to import their logos, their branding, or their shapes from Photoshop or Illustrator that they made, and when they scale things up and animate them, they're kind of pixelated. So this is a really quick way to kind of enable rasterization for your shape layers. And again, this works for Photoshop vectors and Illustrator vectors as well. So let's move on to the fun stuff now, the shape layers. So shape layers are very, very powerful because they're very customizable, and again, they're created in After Effects. And if it's created in After Effects, we can edit it in After Effects. So I have this really very basic but retro kind of scene here set up for shape layers. A pretty fun kind of firework poppy explosion animation that we'll be creating in just a second with some shape layers. So let's go ahead and create a new composition, and we're going to call this fireworks. Hit OK. And let's go ahead and create our background layer. So Control Command Y, and call this BG. So let's start off with the shape layers. Again, shape layers are created in After Effects. They are vector layers, except this time, let's go ahead and select the nice star tool right here, and just draw a nice star out. And as you can see, shape layers are actually their own layer. It's not masking out any other layer. It's not really cropping out any other layer. It's its own separate layer. And this is what's really, really powerful about shape layers. I'm going to center this thing up a little bit. And once again, because it's created in After Effects, we can actually customize it. And it's really, really powerful this way. So if I go down to the contents, polystar 1, and then polystar path, we have all these parameters that we can actually fine tune and edit our shape layer. For an example, we have number of points, we have the inner radius, we have the outer radius. I mean, there's so many options that you can do, and it's so much easier to customize these things with shape layers rather than mask layer. So if you really want some nice symmetrical control over your shape layers, you definitely want to use shape layers. If you want full control over the path for some weird objects like rotoscoping, you would use a mask. So pretty cool here. We can change the roundness to create somewhat of a nice flower, I guess. And we can kind of start from here, I guess. So we just have this basic shape layer. And again, because shape layers are not really masking out another layer, we have to change the shape layer color by going up to the fill. We can't go up to the layer and then layer solid color settings or any of that stuff. Go up to the fill and we can change the color to whatever we want. So I'm going to make it a nice bright orange color. And then we can animate this thing by hitting R on the keyboard. And then we can rotate it this way. Except I want to use a quick expression, which is going to multiply the time times the rotation parameter right here. But for the sake of consistency, let's go ahead and get this little tool right here for the anchor point tool, paint behind tool. And we can just move the anchor point to the center of the circle here. So now that when we rotate it, it's going to rotate with this anchor point. So for a quick expression, let's hold Alt or Option and click on the stopwatch. So we can apply some expression and just time asterisk 20. And it's going to multiply the time by 20, and it's going to apply it to the rotation. That way we get some nice animation without any keyframes. And then we can duplicate it, Control Command D, hit S, scale it up. And then again we can change the layer color by going to the fill, maybe making it a nice red. Something like that. And then again, if you hit U on the keyboard to show all keyframes, you can also see all the expressions applied to it. And we can change this to 15 to give it more variation. So now they're kind of rotating at different increments. Pretty cool. And then we can duplicate it one more time. Hit U, change it to maybe 10. And this can be a lighter orange. Something like that. And then we can scale this one up as well. You know, some basic nice animation like this. just a really nice way to create some nice symmetrical shapes. And again, they're all vector layers, so they're all nicely rasterized and crisp and sharp. So let's go ahead and make these things 3D layers. And let's go ahead and animate them. So hit P on the keyboard. We're just going to push them back a little bit. And then hit the keyframe stopwatch. Move it to the beginning of the timeline. And maybe around 20 frames or so, we can just scoot up and then change this back to 0. So now we have this kind of zooming in effect. And now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and add some more variation by kind of playing around with the offset a little bit. So let's move this one forward, move this one forward, so that they'll spin and come in at different times. So first we have the first layer that comes in, and then we have the second layer, and then we have the third layer, which really gives it that nice variation. Pretty cool effect. And then we can apply some nice text, so layer new text. Call this fireworks. And then we can center it up with the align panel. And then we can just animate this thing the same way, make it a 3D layer. And animate the same points as our first shape layer. So let's just go ahead and pull this thing back. Hit a keyframe. And set this to 0. And we can easy ease this thing by hitting F9 or go to animation, keyframe assistant, easy ease. And then we can easy ease these keyframes as well. And that's just going to smooth things in a little bit. So now we have this kind of poppy, retro, pretty cool animation. And the reason why I created this basic intro today in this lesson is to kind of expose you guys to my workflow, as well as showing you some basic animation skills. Because I don't want to just sit here and just tell you guys what to do and explain things. I want to sit here, explain things, as well as show you guys how to create an animation and how to, create a basic intro, so you guys won't be bored to death. So just a really quick but retro animation. You can add a nice vignette, you can add some layer styles, add some grunge, some texture to it, but pretty much this is how you create a really basic intro using shape layers. And I hope to create an intro in every single lesson from now on, just to give you more practice with animation and just give you an idea of how things work. So in the next lesson, we're going to be talking about enhancing motion graphics for realism, where we're going to be using some expressions as well as the graph editor to kind of enhance the movement and flow of all of our animations in motion graphics. So stay tuned for that. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the forums. I'll try to answer all your questions as soon as I can. And until next time, don't forget to experiment in After Effects, play around with shape layers, play around with masks and expressions. And I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye guys.